Exactly 6 p.m. in Cairo, ladies and gentlemen. Time to look up at the news bulletin from Channel 2. I'm Hanan Al-Khouli. President El-Sisi makes an inspection tour to the military academy, delivers a speech to its students. Prime Minister Madbouli says opening the Grand Egyptian Museum set on November the 1st. And UN warns expanded Israeli-Gaza war risks catastrophic consequences. Welcome back. The news in full. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi made an inspection tour to the military academy on Wednesday. The president delivered a speech to the academy students where he said that the transparency of the state's policy and frankness paid a lot over the last 10 years. The head of state warned against any attempts to sow sedition or divisions among Arab nations via social media. President El-Sisi affirmed that despite 2011 regional turbulences, Egypt maintains good relations with Arab countries. He asserted that Egypt enjoys internal stability, adding that the country has been facing huge security challenges for a decade, but bypassed them all. President El-Sisi also noted that geopolitical tensions, especially Gaza war, had negatively impacted the Egyptian economy, and he affirmed that Egypt would continue its efforts to put an end to the war and to provide humanitarian aid to Gaza. The president reiterated that despite regional tensions, Egypt's economic reform was proceeding in a good way. He called on Egyptians to keep united and close the ranks to overcome obstacles. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli announced on Wednesday that President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi had agreed to set the 1st of November as a new date for the inauguration of the Grand Egyptian Museum. In a meeting or in a weekly cabinet meeting in the administrative capital, the Prime Minister announced that, and he said that the inauguration would be attended by a number of world leaders, as the museum is considered as an iconic cultural and touristic edifice. And the cabinet meeting also tackled the President El-Sisi's activities, including his Tuesday's summit talks with the Vietnamese president, as well as the ratification of the old renting law. Speaker of the House of Representatives, Councillor Hanafi El-Gibali, on Wednesday praised positive momentum on the bilateral relations, and especially with Vietnam. Meeting with visiting Vietnamese President Leung Kyung, Councillor Gibali said that the volume of Vietnamese investments in Egypt should increase to cope with the consistently developing political relations. Speaker Gibali also praised Vietnam's positions in support of Arab issues, notably the Middle East peace process and the two-state solution. The Vietnamese president, who's leading a multi-day visit to Egypt, has met with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli on Tuesday and appreciated historical ties with Egypt. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Immigration and Expatriates Affairs Badr Abdelati held talks with the Greek counterpart in Athens on Wednesday. Speaking at the joint press conference following their talks, the top diplomat said that Egypt considers St. Catherine Monetary as a sacred place, and the top diplomat asserted keenness on boosting the cooperation and bilateral relations with Greece. The top diplomat asserted keenness on boosting cooperation with Greece in various domains. He asserted that humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza is unbearable, and the international community should ensure an immediate ceasefire is in place and a release of hostages is possible. Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati today held phone talks with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Arkachi and Chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency Grossi, and Egypt's top diplomat stressed the importance of committing to diplomatic paths in solving crises, paving the way to resume cooperation between Tehran and the UN Nuclear Agency on the Iranian nuclear program. The phone calls fall in the line with Egypt's continued efforts for resuming negotiations on Iran nuclear program with the aim of restoring peace, security, and stability in the region. Amid ongoing Egyptian efforts to alleviate the humanitarian crisis suffered by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, the 9th aid convoy entered Gaza as part of the initiative entitled Zad al-Izza from Egypt to Gaza that was launched by Egyptian Red Crescent on the 27th of July. Carrying tons of food, aid, and different humanitarian supplies, the convoy's trucks were sent across Rafah land port crossings. More than 1,000 trucks carrying 10,000 tons of food have entered since the beginning of the initiative. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency said Wednesday that 20 people were killed when an aid truck overturned into the Nusayrat refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip. The agency's spokesperson Mahmoud Basil said last night's incident took place last night after Israel forced truck drivers to take unsafe roads to reach aid distribution centers. Several others were wounded, and meanwhile, the United Nations called reports about a possible decision to expand its military offensive throughout the Gaza Strip deeply alarming and if true. Speaking at the UN Security Council meeting, Miroslav Jenka, UN Assistant Secretary General for Europe, Central Asia, and the Americas, said that international law is clear in the regard. Gaza is and must remain an integral part of the future Palestinian state. Highlighting the insufficient amount of aid that is currently entering Gaza, Jenka added that there was no military solution to the conflict in Gaza or the border Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Palestinian UN Ambassador Riyad Mansour said that Israel defines the entire world and announcing by announcing plans to reoccupy all the Gaza Strip. At an emerging meeting of the UN Security Council over the crisis of the hostages held in Gaza, he said Israel is demanding the world to take a stance against starvation when it's actually starving an entire civilian population, when it's shooting at them while they seek water and food. At least 3 Palestinians and Hezbollah's leader Naim Qassem had called on Wednesday and expressing hope this decision should actually come through and occurred. Qassem made his call as Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam tasked the army with developing a plan to disarm Hezbollah by year-end. The Lebanese cabinet held a nearly 6-hour cabinet session on Tuesday, headed by President Joseph Aoun, on disarming the group after the latest Israeli aggression in 2024. Qassem said that any timetable presented for implementation under Israeli aggression cannot be agreed to. Kremlin foreign policy aide said on Wednesday that talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff were useful and constructive. Witkoff held around 3 hours of talks with Putin and the Kremlin after arriving in Moscow to seek a breakthrough in the Ukraine war. Kremlin aide said that the two sides discussed the conflict in Ukraine and the potential for improving U.S.-Russia relations. He said that Moscow had received certain signals from U.S. President Donald Trump and had sent messages in return. Trump said Tuesday that he would await the outcome of the Moscow talks before moving forward with any more economic pressure on Russia. And domestically, Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources Karim Badawi talked today, asserted the importance of cooperation with Jordan in the natural gas field and pointing out to the integration between the two countries through the Arab gas pipeline. The minister made these remarks as he paid a visit to the liquidated natural gas terminal of Al-Aqaba port in Jordan to follow up the experimental operation of Energos Force LNG vessel ahead of its linkage to the Arab pipeline. The vessel, which docked at the port at the start of August, was and chartered by the Egyptian Natural Gas Holding Company, reflecting the partnership between Egypt and Jordan, as well as their shared commitment to securing gas supplies in times of need. And Egypt's Boursa indices mostly rose at the end of today's trading session amid purchases by local and Arab corporations against sell-offs by local Arab and foreign investors. The market capital of listed companies added 6 billion Egyptian pounds, crossing 2.4 trillion pounds at the close of an average transactions of 62.7 billion pounds. The benchmark index, EGX 30, surged 0.6% above the 35,480 point mark. The equal weighted index EGX 70 climbed 0.2%, while the broader index EGX 100 was flat. And moving on to the interesting world of sports, as Egypt's national young handball team will take on South Korean rivals today at 8 p.m. This, of course, CLT at the Cairo International Stadium at the start of their campaign in the 11th IHF Men's U19 World Handball Championship. Egypt hosts the tournament from August the 6th to the 17th, featuring 32 teams and 4 venues across Cairo and the new administrative capital. The young Pharaohs are placed in Group G along with Bahrain, Japan, and South Korea. Still with the sports news, as Al Zamalek continued training today as part of preparations for the 2025 Well, with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our news bulletin for now. Many thanks for watching, and from myself, Hanan Al Khouli.